I'm not a very tall person.
You're not my height?
No. Half a meter.
Is that better?
I think so, I don't know. Can you hear me, please? Good evening. My name is Ruth Berlinger, born Ruth Pizyc. I've been given approximately half an hour to tell about my memories from the Warsaw Ghetto and after the ghetto. Talk more? I told you I was short.
There.
Thank you. Is it better? Right. To talk about all this in half an hour is really mission impossible, but I'll give it a try. Also, many years have passed, so it's possible that not all of my memories happened exactly the way I remember. I was born in Warsaw in 1931 to an upper middle class family. My paternal grandparents were wealthy, enlightened Hasidim, while my mother came from a poor, assimilated family of musicians. My parents' marriage was a very happy one. My only sister, Mira, was 9 years older than me. My parents' name was Koppel and Genia Pizyc. In 1937, my parents took a cruise to Palestine in order to see if we should move there. It had long been my father's dream, and he spoke and wrote Hebrew fluently. In addition, my youngest uncle Zrulek was in Palestine since a number of years. Some parts of the correspondence between my father and Zrulek still remains. After many weeks, my parents came back, telling us about thrilling adventures and bringing great presents. But the answer was no. They felt the living conditions in Palestine were too difficult, and so they postponed the decision for the time being. The only problem of my childhood was that I refused to eat. The nannies couldn't cope with this, and in the end my parents called a pediatrician, Dr. Janusz Korczak. I loved meeting with him. My first school year, everything was fine, except some nasty notes in my desk saying, "You filthy Jew, go to your Palestine." In the spring of 1939, my sister Mira graduated high school with excellent grades. She wanted to study medicine, but that was not allowed for Jews. She did a paramedic course in case the war would break out. My mother, born in 1895, attended a Russian-speaking high school before the First World War. The other top students received a gold medal, but since she was Jewish, she and her Jewish classmates got only a diploma. On September the 1st, 1939, a week before my birthday, my 8th birthday, my happy childhood came to an end. Warsaw was bombed. We had to sit in the shelter where it was suffocating and scary. During one of the bombings, the house across from ours was hit. My 17-year-old sister went to help a woman who went into labor, and already then she showed her great abilities. During another bombing, our apartment window shattered and killed my canaries. I saw the small bloody bodies and was devastated. And that became my first experience of death. Our dear, faithful maid, Elżbieta, who had worked for us from before I was born, was forced to leave us, which was heartbreaking. My father found Elżbieta through the Red Cross after the war. Already by the end of September, Poland capitulated, and soon we had German soldiers on the streets of Warsaw. Very soon, new laws were put into force. Every day, there were new posters in German and Polish. There were food rations, curfews, and other restrictions. And almost immediately, especially laws for the Jews. I remember that I couldn't understand that, and I kept asking my parents why. We were told that all the Jews were to be moved to something called the ghetto. Nobody knew what that meant or could answer my many questions. I was fearful. There was also an announcement about that the Jewish people going to ghetto were not allowed to take with them any kind of valuable belongings. And it happened one day that a German man and a Polish man came to our place. I remember I was alone there with my mother, and I understood afterwards why my father was not there. They went around the flat and put some notes in their papers, and on the furniture, pieces of art, the wonderful library of my father, everything was confiscated. And then they came to the most valuable thing for my mother, and that was her piano. I don't know how it happened. My mother talked German in her gentle and elegant and sweet way, and somehow she could persuade them not to put the mark on the piano, and the piano was there and came with us to ghetto, which was very unusual. In November 1940, we and several of my father's siblings moved with their families to my grandparents' large apartment, which was located within the walls of the ghetto. Now there were 14 of us. My grandparents and their Jewish maid Frida, our family, an unmarried uncle, 2 married aunts with their sons, and my father's only sister, Ida, with her little son, Alexander. 2 of my father's brothers and the brother-in-law had, together with tens of thousands of others, fled across the border to Russia. Life in the ghetto was different. It was crowded both in the house and in the street. The women did not get along well in the kitchen. My mother was not used to cooking, and there was very little food to be had. Many common products like butter, sugar, milk, tea, and coffee were replaced with replacements. One of the first words I learned in German was Ersatz. Bread, potatoes, flour, and so on were rationed. It only took a short while until I was hungry, or very hungry, all the time. And yet, many people around us had it worse. If you had money, you could, at least in the beginning, get additional food. There was a lot of smuggling going on all the time in the ghetto. For the most part, it was young boys who risked their lives climbing over the wall, on top of which was barbed wire. From my window, I saw some boys scaling the wall, but a German soldier also saw them. He shot one of the boys, who was left there wounded for hours, crying for help. That was the first time I witnessed an execution. As strange as it may sound, there was a rich cultural life in the ghetto in the beginning. My father, together with some friends, started a children's choir and at the same time made sure that the children got some extra food. The repertoire of the choir was mostly sentimental Hebrew songs like Kinneret. I listened and dreamed of freedom and Palestine. There was a high percentage of Jewish artists, musicians, actors, writers, etc. in Polish cultural life in Warsaw. Now they were all unemployed. My mother's piano drew several pianists. The only one of them I knew by name was a young man, my first crush. His name was Piotr Auerbach. He was happy, talented, and beautiful, and he was so sure he would make it through the war. Everybody who heard him play, thought he would have brilliant musical career, but we were told that he and his family were all murdered. Soon all cultural events came to an end. Former members of the Philharmonic Orchestra were playing in the street. My parents cried. They knew these musicians personally, all from the concert hall. The ghetto shrunk. We had to move several times. Every time it started with the same procedure. The Germans ordered everybody to hand over their jewelry and cash within a few hours. If not, we would be made to move. After each such ultimatum, after the Germans took their loot, we had to move anyway, each time to smaller accommodations. While the area of the ghetto shrunk, the number of people grew. People moved in from other cities and villages, even from other countries. A family from Vienna with a girl my age, Hella, were given a room in the house where we were living. We became good friends despite speaking different languages, and my parents did everything to help these charming, cultured people. At this point, the ghetto turned into a hell. Starvation, epidemics. My maternal grandmother died from typhoid, and my mother was inconsolable. Every day there were heaps of corpses in the streets, mostly of children. Special body collectors were appointed, who gathered the dead on wagons. The streets were filled with beggars who asked just for a tiny piece of bread. My father's parents and other adults worked in workshops. It was difficult to find employment, and everybody tried to find work because those who were employed received some kind of passport and a plate of soup and some bread daily. But gradually the rules became stricter, and soon there were many unemployed people in the family. I know that my father and his younger brother Leib worked day and night to try to save the family and others. My mother's sister Lutka let us know that she would be visiting from the other side of the ghetto. She didn't arrive. Only the following day we were told that she had been shot in the street. Again, my mother was desperate. I remember holding her. She said nothing, and I was terrified. Until this point, I and many other children had received an education in several topics. That was strictly forbidden by the Germans. Jews were not allowed to go to school or be taught. But my parents insisted, not always to my liking. During war and crisis, there is no equality. Everybody scrambles to survive and save their family. No doubt, the family's money helped us survive. The situation in the ghetto turned catastrophic. Thousands of people were sent to the Umschlagsplatz, the railway station, every day, and were sent off to concentration camps. We were told that my dear Dr. Janusz Korczak had led his orphans to the trains, although he was offered protection by the Germans. The Germans shot people when they felt like it. An infamous soldier, nicknamed Frankenstein, screamed to me to walk slowly towards the nearest entrance while he trailed his gun after me and laughed. For some reason, he didn't shoot. The first family member to be taken was Frida, the maid. She was torn from us and put on a completely full lorry, calling in Yiddish to us and God to help her. Then suddenly my cousin Hanka, who was my age, and her mother disappeared. They had managed to get out of the ghetto and hide with Poles somewhere. They too survived. Hanka and I were always together, but we fought a lot because we were very different. The adults would admonish us, and eventually somebody would always say, "How can you be so childish? Don't you understand what's going on?" Sure, we were childish. We were children. Hanka and I often took care of our little cousins Alec and Victor. Hanka was practical, while I was good in thinking up games and stories. Both the cousins and their parents were killed in the war. Our extended family had to split up. When we came back from one razzia, my father's parents, brother Leib, sister Ida with her son Alex, Aunt Rena and her Victor, all were gone. They had been sent to concentration camp in Poniatów. My father somehow managed to get a non-Jewish worker to mail a package with food to the family in Poniatów. They let us know that they had received the package. Soon after that, they were all murdered. My parents and Mira decided that two of us would try to leave the ghetto. My mother's sister, already on the Aryan side, had found a place, but only for two. As usual, nobody asked me, and I was deeply insulted. Adolf Beermann, a friend of my father's, gave us false passports and birth certificates. We got new names, and I had to learn my new identity and learn some Catholic prayers, which was nonsense altogether. Now I was Zosia Gajewska. I remember how thrilling it was. False passports, fingerprints, the secrecy, like in a thriller. It was decided that my mother and me would leave. Now, 70 years later, it is still hard for me to think about this. We did not want to be separated, and we wanted to leave. Then it was time. A gendarme at the ghetto at the gate of the ghetto wall was bribed. Suddenly, we were on the outside. We must have looked very strange, with layers of clothes on our skinny bodies and bundles of a few necessities. Immediately we saw a young man approaching, and again I thought, this is the end. He blocked our way and said, "Give me your jewelry or I'll call the Gestapo, bloody Jews." My mother said she had no money, but he could have her ring. He took her diamond ring. Quietly, my mother asked to keep her wedding ring, but he took that too and disappeared. I don't know how we got to the first address. I was on the verge of fainting the whole time. We went to the parents of my sister's close friends. They gave us something to drink and eat, received us with great warmth, but were terrified by our visit. The next stop that evening was to our old address, which our former neighbors, Mr. and Mrs. Retour. They let us stay overnight. Their 8-year-old daughter was listening at the door. Eventually, she came into the room and asked, "Are they really Jews? My teacher told us that the Jews have horns, but they don't have any." The next morning, we reached our destination, where we met my Aunt Cesia with family and the people we were to live with. My mother and Cesia kept crying, and I missed my father and Mira. This all happened barely 3 weeks before the ghetto uprising. Meanwhile, we moved to another family, the Szabłowski, who lived in Praga, the eastern part of Warsaw. The man in this house was a sickly old man, a pseudo writer and translator. His wife, Helena, was 30 years younger, a simple, kind and sweet woman. They had one son, Teos, of about 15. Teos was a half-criminal kid with sadistic tendencies. Several other Jews, singles and couples, came and left. Sometimes we all had to hide in a little room behind a fake bookcase. We had to be invisible to neighbors and visitors. We had to obey strict rules: no shoes, flush the toilet only occasionally, not get close to the windows, whisper, etc. The little hideaway was very cramped. Under no circumstances were we allowed to sneeze or cough. There was not enough oxygen in the space, and I tended to faint. Sometimes I only came to when the door opened. Teos liked experimenting. He was often out spying or doing sabotage with his friends. He would show us bolts and screws that he had taken from trains at a nearby railway station. Had he been caught, he would have been executed. In his home, not only Jews were hidden, but also a radio and weapons. All of that was punishable by death, which Teos thought was cool. Teos had a hobby. He brought home a crow with a broken wing, nursed it to health, and then fed it with food mixed with nails. He brought home white mice to experiment on them. Soon he grew tired of the mice, and I got to take care of them. That was my happiness. I had a purpose in life. Teusz was at the window at night when the ghetto uprising started. "Look," he said, "the Jews are going up in flames." We were petrified with fear for Mira and my father. In all the different locations we stayed, all information about the situation and the money to pay our hosts was delivered by our courier. Her name was Wanda Elster, and she was maybe 18 at the time. She looked like a Polish peasant girl, so she didn't awaken suspicion as to her real identity. Wanda's sister fought and died in the ghetto uprising. Without Wanda's extraordinary courage, strength, and inventiveness, we surely would not have survived the war. Wanda survived the war, moved to Israel, married, and had a son. She has a son. We stayed in touch with her over the years until she passed away in Tel Aviv some years ago. My father and Mira managed to get out of the ghetto, hidden under foodstuff in one of the last trucks that the Germans transported from the burning ghetto to the Polish side. They came to us and we were united again. That was the only truly important thing, and it was wonderful. Our family had to move from place to place, sometimes together, sometimes not. Moving was very dangerous. The Poles, mind you, not all Poles, were always quick to report on Jews. Many, very many Jews in hiding were reported and executed. Also, I doubt there are any reliable numbers. One winter in hiding was the worst. We lived in a closed-off room without any furniture. We were not allowed to use the lights. Our host was a policewoman. At night she lay in her big bed under several down quilts, with at least 3 pillows under her cruel head. She herself told us that all her bedding came from ghetto.